Hey everyone, JP here with another Kings of War battle report, the first of which under my new name, Caffeinated Warlord. It's still the same channel that it was, a couple of dabblers, except now my wife has her own channel, Foz's Corner, where you can see all her stitching content if you are a stitcher, or if you just happen to really like her stuff after getting out of Kings of War. I understand. So if you want, go give her a like and subscribe to her first video, give it a view. Otherwise, if you're here for some Kings of War content, watch on. So this particular battle had a reason, and that reason was to prepare Matt Truella for Clash of Kings Australia 2023, the preeminent Australian Kings of War tournament that happens every January around Australia Day. This one was a bit earlier, in Canberra, held by Matt Croger. A fantastic event which I attended last year and got 6 videos out of. Now unfortunately this year I couldn't go because it fell right onto Chinese New Year. So instead I was making dumplings. Too many dumplings, but dumplings nonetheless. Regardless, I did help him prepare because I felt at least I should contribute something. So I contributed a 2,000 point game of using my Trident Realms, which is not exactly the main meta threatening challenge for his list. You know, maybe I should have done some ogres or elves with Gladestalkers or even some greater elementals in some kind of list. But no, I don't have any of those sorts of things, and so I took my Trident Realms, which I'd just been kind of building up for the slow grow. That was the countercharge slow grow. And I managed to get most of it done, so I'm quite proud of that. I'm going to make a video about that soon. But let's just get into the battle, which was against Matt's Varangur. So you've seen this Varangur before. They are the Aztec kind of Varangur, the Xiotec Varangur. So you saw them against the Goblins was the last one. So he's testing out some more variations of the list, trying to get a very tight 2,000 points. And part of that was trying to include Night Raiders, which are the Gladestalker equivalents that the Varangur have available to them. They're not quite as good as Gladestalkers, but they still have that kind of duality to them where they can do quite well in shooting and quite well in combat, while also being a little bit fragile, but they do have stealthy. So we'll see if he can get them to work, but also if he can get them to come in the post. So there will be a few units in his army, mainly just the Night Raiders, that will be just some bases with a couple models on them. He was trying to get some more from Warlord Games up in the UK. And my army, at this point, wasn't quite done for the slow grow, because it's amazing, in the last 2 weeks of that countercharge slow grow campaign, I painted a lot. I finished like the Coral Giant, I finished the Placoderms, well, at least the models, I didn't finish the bases. I finished a whole lot. But at the time of this filming, I didn't have quite all of it done. So I do apologize for half-painted models. But that's why we'll make this battle report quick, so you don't have to look at it for all too long. And as some compensation, as I talk about each of the units in my army list, I'll put up a picture of the painted version, with the exception of the Gigas, because I haven't done them yet. So let's get on to the army list. So it's 2,000 points of Trident Realms. And we'll start off with the main heavy infantry that I just really like to include and attracted me to the army when I first got a Kraken as a prize, and then I looked at the army list. It was the Placoderms. They're Defense 6 infantry with Phalanx. They are just a really good anvil. They're not the toughest anvil, they don't have the highest nerve, they're not like a horde or something. You can't take them in hordes, although I wish you could. But 2 regiments of them you can really put in the way of cavalry. You can just put them either side of your units to just hold down those flanks, because if they have to send anything in, they have to send it in a lot. I'm still working out how to use them best. Sometimes I send them into combats when I shouldn't, but overall I'm really enjoying how to use them, and I'm glad I've gone to the effort of making the models out of salamander models, which I'll show in a video. Next, I have a regiment of water elementals, some very good thick chaff thanks to their defense 5, regeneration 5+, and fearless nerve of -14. And I give them healing brew just to help heal a little bit more. And they usually always survive that first charge, so always get a chance to use their healing brew, which is good. Then I have another very hard unit, and that is the Gigas, which are a monstrous infantry horde. But they're quite strange in that they have big shield, but they're height 2, they have speed 5, but they're nimble, they have crushing 2, but they've only got 12 attacks instead of 18, like you would expect in a monster. They kind of break a lot of the rules, but I do quite like them. I would like to get into depth horrors, but I would prefer if there was actually a model for them, rather than trying to find some kind of gribbly. So, Gigas for now, and when you do Math Hammer, against Defense 5 units, Gigas do comparable damage output. Even though they have less attacks, they do have Vicious and Crushing 2, rather than Crushing 1, 18 attacks. So, it all turns out roughly the same. And I do like to give them the Staying Stone, which I've been told is the single best item for waiver mitigation, because what it does, it really just reduces the chance of a waiver by 50% for a measly 5 points. So it really is just a fantastic little item to just pip in there. Next, I have some fantastic chaff, the Tidal Swarm. It's just Tidal Swarm Regiment. We just go. It's a very weak little swarm thing that can act as your height 1 chaff. Then that is usually coupled with the Nucker, who is a nimble monster that can just get around and get into flanks, get behind. He's fantastic for 150 points. He's got Crushing 1, Thunder 1, in case you're wondering. Then we're starting to get the big stuff, which really gets me excited to play Trident Realms, really. It's just all the monsters, and that is, firstly, the Coral Giant, who is like most giants. You know, he's got the kind of semi-random attacks, and then he has Crushing. This one has Crushing 3. He has Brutal. What makes him different, though, from all the standard giant, instead of having Fury, he has Iron Resolve, and he has Ensnare. So that actually makes him quite durable compared to other giants, as well, mainly in combat. He's still got the defense 5, so he's not going to get shot completely off straight away, but he's definitely, I'd say, I like the Ensnare more, I'd say, than the Fury. And so what I've used a giant model, and I've just kind of coralled him up. But it was actually the Shadow Hulk miniature, because I wanted that kind of almost shark mouth. Rocket, be quiet. Anyway, that was Rocket. He's whining a bit. Then I also have the other monster, so that's the Kraken, and I find that the Kraken also a fantastic model, and that's actually what I won at the last Clash of Kings. It was a door prize, and that's what got me into this whole army in the first place. He's a bit more of a speedy kind of dragon, kind of titan, so the giant is one that will deal damage, whereas the Kraken actually has the capacity to just tar pit things down. But yeah, he's still tricky to use because he is defense 4. He can get one shot quite easily, even though he has Ensnare. So you do have to carefully pick the fights that he goes into, because anything that can deal a lot of damage very quickly will just take him out. And he also doesn't have Fury, so if he's wavered, he's out. So yeah. But the Kraken is a fantastic model, and so I do try to use the Kraken and the Coral Giant in the same game. I think once I get that out of my system, I might move on to army lists that have one or the other, but for now I try and take them both in a 2,000 point list, which is really just crazy. Moving right along, we have Ector, the hero of the Placoderm nature, so he's a Placoderm hero, and he's just great because he has what the Placoderms have, which is defense 6 and phalanx, but he also has Ensnare. At defense 6 Ensnarer, it's really nasty. So, and he's individual, so you're not really going to shoot him off, you're not going to charge him off, he's really just going to get in the way. And when he's not doing stuff like getting in the way, he has a Wind Blast that deals damage, Wind Blast 8. So that's just, he's a great little model to have, and the only downside is the fact that he is an individual. You know, he does help, but it also just means he's not scoring, and he's a lot of points for someone that's just not scoring, 165 points. Finally, we have the Hidden Ones formation, which, if you see most Trident Realms lists, they will take this formation because it's fantastic, and you can't fault them. It's the way to take the Thule. So you want 2 Thule regiments, this is what you do. You take the formation, so you have 2 Thule regiments and 1 Thule Mythicon, and the Thule Mythicon gets an aura of Thunderous Charge for Cephalopods, which happens to be Thule, and the Kraken if you want. So Thunderous Charge 1 means that these Thule finally get some like actual piercing power, because normally they don't have any crushing strength or thunderous, but this is how they get it. And these guys are a berserker unit, so they already have like a lot of attacks in melee 3, so you can see it starts to get pretty good. And then everything gets Pathfinder, so fantastic. You've got your Thunderous Charge, you're probably going to get it nearly all the time, and yeah, they're just dealing more damage. Then things get expensive because I start putting items on them. So I've got Chant of Hate on one of the Thule regiments and Blessing of the Gods on the other. So it's, it's vicious and elite on either of them, just to really increase their damage output. And then I'm trialing Host Shadow Beast on the Hidden One hero. So the Thor Mythicon, just because it's this new iteration of the spell from the new rulebook, so that it's now just like a set number of attacks that's given, and those number of attacks are done kind of like a mop-up attack, kind of separately, and they won't multiply or anything like that. But it definitely increases the damage output of that Thor Mythicon, who's already really quite good. So that's the list. It's got a bit of everything, but what it does lack is really any kind of shooting apart from that Wind Blast, and I always kind of notice that. So yeah. How I'll change this list up, we'll just see over time, but that's the list for now. Now on to Matt's Varangur. So you've seen this army, quite a similar version of it before, and this is him trying to keep on going with the 2 Fallen hordes, because he really likes the Fallen. If you're not familiar with the Fallen, they're a nimble horde of height 2 monstrous infantry kind of guys. They kind of just run around because they're nimble Pathfinder. You can't stop them really, but they've only got crushing 1, 18 attacks. So that's what is always, like, you get them into the fight. You can always get them into the fight because they're quite fast, speed 8, but then they they struggle. So they need items, and then they start getting really expensive. Like, they're expensive already because of all the cool rules they have, but then Matt gives them Blessing of the Gods, Brew of Strength for those 2 different hordes, and they're pricey things. And then he has the rest of the army that kind of helps it. So the Snow Foxes act as the chaff for these guys. So there's 2 of those. And then 2 Night Raider regiments, so they're the kind of Gladestalker-esque units. One with Fire Oil, which is a fantastic thing on a kind of Gladestalker unit, because that means their shooting has extra piercing, and when they're in combat, they have extra crushing against things with regeneration, which, I have quite a few units with regeneration, like my poor Kraken. Then we have the other one with the Staying Stone. Already mentioned enough about the Staying Stone. Then we have another thing that he was trying to experiment with, which was a horde of clansmen, which are the standard kind of melee infantry of the Varangur, but they've been upgraded to the Norbik clansmen, which means they get defense 5. And then he's given them Suggesties Boots of Striding, which is the newish version that gives both Pathfinder and Strider for 1 turn only. So just to make sure his horde can actually get through wherever it needs to go, because it's it's a big footprint, so you want to make sure it's not getting hindered whichever way it might be going. Then we have one nice little unlocking Draugr regiment with the Healing Brew, and then finally the staples of his lists, at least, Krufnir and MacLeod. So Krufnir is the Snow Troll Prime, but with a better profile. He's just better in every way. He has very inspiring, and I think he's also got a weird rule that most of the time is forgotten, and that's the Bring Me Their Head, which gives Duelist to a unit. But it's actually started coming up more and more, probably just because Matt's actually looking out for it and maybe remembering it. So yeah, it's a cool rule. It's definitely flavoursome. It's like, he's telling some unit to go take on that single dude, Bring Me Their Head. It's very cool. And then MacLeod, fantastic. Their downside is she's an individual, but she can stop nearly everything. And the amount of times she goes into a unit and just kills it, just because she has like 7 attacks, crushing 3. Like, it's just, it just goes crushing 3. Let me check. Might not be crushing 3. MacLeod, what are you? Crushing 2, but elite, yes. And that's really what in the last unit is the main strength of that, is the Lord and Chimera. So, it's your standard kind of dragon with the crushing 3, flying, nimble, blah, you've got a breath attack, but it has elite. And so dragons with elite, like the elf dragon, they're really good, because I just feel like if you ever take these dragon units, of which the main one I've got much familiarity with is the Archfiend, and the Archfiend, 10 attacks, and geez, the amount of times, what was it, 9 attacks? Might be 9 attacks, but anyway, limited number of attacks, and when you just miss with a bunch, whoa. I mean, it has vicious, but when you're rolling 2s to wound, it really doesn't matter. It's really the thing that makes you sweat is that melee 3+. When it really shouldn't, but it does. So the Lord and Chimera kind of gets over that, and he's also got very inspiring. So much of the list is very inspiring, but yes, it's not your typical Varangur list, because we've got no mounted suns, and that's mainly because the Aztec theme. There are no horses in the Americas, so therefore there are no horses in this army prior to the Spanish. And then there's also no Frostfangs, but that's just something that he's just experimenting with to see if he can get more of what he likes in, and this was just testing it at the list. This wasn't what ended up going to Clash of Kings, which you can take a look at the website. The Mantic Companion, you can find the Clash of Kings event and look at the lists. But this led him to make the decisions that Frostfangs are good, which we all unfortunately knew. So, moving right along, the scenario we went for was Dominate. Dominate's always a good one. It's going to be in every tournament, and in all likelihood, it was definitely going to be a Clash of Kings. So we've got Dominate here, and I've taken a picture right through the first turn. He's already started moving because he got the first turn, and then I was like, oh, I need to take a picture. But we'll just go through the deployment first. Dominate doesn't really need much introduction. We've got the token right in the middle, and you try and have, by the end of the game, more stuff, unit strength, in there than your opponent. Simple. But it does mean you kind of have to then focus on the middle. And sometimes I get too focused, when really, I've got 6 turns to get there, and the Trident Realms aren't really that slow. So let's go with my deployment. So down here on the left, you can see there is my Coral Giant. I like to put the Coral Giant, there's not really that much shooting I have to worry about from him, but I do like to have a little bit of something blocking, and I also tend to try and take advantage of any of the obstacles that might be there, because he has Stride Up. Then, behind this forest, I have my 2 regiments of Thule, and there's a Thule Mythicin in between them, so they're pretty cool. And those are behind the thick chaff that are the water elementals. Next to those are the Placoderm regiment, first one, so it's painted Placoderms, but on an MDF base. I do apologise. There's Ector, all painted up. The Gigas right next to those, so this is more in the centre of the battlefield. And then finally, on the other side of the Gigas, I have the other Placoderms. Then we have here that Nucker, and over there, there's the Kraken on the far right, who is so fast, he's able to get in as long as he just gets the right angle. So I've got to kind of start him off angled so he doesn't waste a turn turning. He can have the possibility of marching up and still maintaining an arc that has the view of his entire army. The one thing I haven't mentioned here is the other chaff, that's the Tidal Swarm, and they've just gone right up through that forest with their scout move. So I had my scout move. Huzzah! And so now the battle has begun. His deployment, as he was moving it, will go from the left to right. So there you can see that's the Chimera. Fantastic model. It just, yeah, he's tried to make sure that really everything is Aztec-like. So, you know, maybe Aztec mythical creatures, Aztec-themed monsters from Warlord Games. And so this is just the fantastic, I don't even know what it's called, but it's just kind of this reptilian bird-like thing, and he's just painted it in these big bright colors, which really kind of match the overall Aztec color schemes. So yeah, that's just here on the side, on the far left, and then on sort of the left half we have one battle group, which are the 2 Fallen Hordes being screened by 2 Snow Fox regiments, and there's MacLeod right in between them to help pin things down or stop things, or yeah, so there's almost like 3 pieces of chaff around those Fallen, so it's a lot of investment, but the Fallen can be worth it. Here underneath his hand is the Horde of Clansmen, with Krufnir behind, who's just always there to kind of help support them. And then here on the right, we have the 2 regiments of Night Raiders that have now entered the forest, and that's probably where they'll stay for quite a lot of the game. It's where they like to be, but I can't do much against them anyway in terms of shooting. And then finally there's the Draga regiment, just over there, being some unit strength. So that's the overall setup, and so we're just going through the terrain. So it's mostly quite self-explanatory. We have, this is a hill, that's a hill, so we've got pretty much the same deployment of hills. And then we have, this is one forest in front of my Thule, the other forest is over here and probably won't affect the game whatsoever. We have blocking terrain, 1 hut on the left and 1 hut on the right, both on his side of the battlefield. And then we have 3 obstacles, an obstacle jutting out of my forest in front of me, an obstacle coming off this hill, and then 1/3 obstacle coming out of that building. So sometimes it's nice to have something that's not the typical kind of battlefield. Oh, and there's a blocking right down here, so we've got 3 blockings. They're a bit smaller, so we felt like we could just chuck in some more. And finally, there's 1 difficult terrain right there underneath his Night Raiders. Wait, no. Maybe that's the... oh, that could be the forest. Yeah, it could be the forest. Anyway, well, hopefully you couldn't hear that. I apologise if you could hear that Facebook update, that was very unprofessional. So, let's get into the battle. Starting with turn 1. Look, picture of a dice, like Death by Dragons. So everything moving up, as you do, trying to get into range, and he's already charged. There's the first charge. We have Snow Foxes into my Tidal Swarm. Will he take them out with 1 Snow Fox regiment? I don't think so. Ensnare can be quite difficult. Over here, well, I just wanted to show you a nice picture of his very cool Chimera, and that's just coming up on the side, and it's just going to, we can see what's going to happen. It's come here, turned, and then it's going to do a big 20-inch jump over here, and then turn to the left to face down my lines. So that is something I have prepared for. I have contingencies in place, because that's what dragons do, and so you need to have something in mind, apart from just turning around your entire army to try and, like, stop it, because that's not a good idea either. As far as the rest of the army is concerned, we have the Fallen now crested the hill, so there's one red horde of Fallen on the hill, there's another horde of Fallen that are being quite bold, but I think they're just keeping out of range of the giant, because they don't want to give that. Or maybe they don't care and they're in range of the giant. Either way, that's the situation. Then we have the rest of the army that's just moved up in a solid line between that house and this hill, looking down at me. So now it's time for my response. No, it's shooting. It's not time for my response. I'm getting shot at. So we can see the Knight Raiders putting a couple of wounds on the regiment of water elementals, which, you know, they have regeneration, so I'm not worried. And a little bit of damage on my Tidal Swarm. So yeah, now it's my turn, so we can see everything has also just kind of moved up, because I'm not a subtle kind of player. But what I have done, a little sneaky, I've got my Knucker over here, not really screening the Krakens, kind of just, they both ended up in the same place, getting in the way of each other, because there's nothing here to threaten them. But yeah, there's the Knucker, there's the Kraken, and they've gonna have range on all these kinds of units, so that's gonna force him to either move back or adjust, or, you know, just think about these kind of units, because these together can definitely threaten any one of those units. The Placoderms are on the hill, mainly because I kind of get obsessed. Like I said, you know, I try and get damage out of them, and so I'm like, oh, if I've got them on the hill, I'll have a thunderous charge down off the hill, 15 attacks, and it's like, just stop. So, yeah, you sometimes you get these romantic notions in your head where you think a unit can do more than it actually can, and that can make you have bad plays. But then everything else is moving up in a solid line, with the exception of the Thule Giant and the Water Elementals, which are all drifting slightly more towards the left to confront the Fallen, because that's really what I see. I see there's threat here, Fallen, and then there's the rest of the army. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it here. And I'm just attacking back, and I do 4 damage on the Snow Foxes, which is pretty good for the Tidal Swarm, which they have not a terrible profile. When I looked at it, it was like 12 attacks, and I was like, huh, cool. So yeah, they do a bit of damage, but I didn't get rid of them. Turn 2, another picture of a dice. So turn 2, as predicted, the dragon came down here to turn and face down my entire army. It's looking at all kinds of flanks. You know, it's got a flank on Thule, it's got a flank on Placoderms, it's got it's quite scary, but like I said, I have something in mind. What is that thing? Well, it's individuals. It's no surprise. Everyone always forgets the Thule Mythic can really beat some things down. He doesn't need to beat down particularly much. He can just slap a little bit. But with his Thunderous 1, Crushing 1, thanks to his aura, and melee 3+, 5 attacks, he's going to do damage. And then with the Host Shadow Beast, he can do quite a bit of damage. And he's also Pathfinder. So yeah, it's just, and he's a caster. But in this case, what he's casting is a combat spell on himself. So that's pretty cool. We can also see double charging here on the Tidal Swarm. So yeah, to be expected from the Snow Foxes. And then finally, well, we've got, well, no other charges. I think here he's now rolling some more shooting. So he's just trying to put some more damage, and we'll see if that damage eventuated to a picture. The rest of the army just really didn't move up at all much, apart from, yeah, there's just the clansmen, and the Fallen Horde are just holding back because they don't really want to get into anything where they'll get flanked, which includes, well, anything here. And Ensnare doesn't really ensure that they'll actually do any consistent damage. And so yeah, here's the guy just taking a picture to show where that dragon is, the Chimera. And then damage done, it's gone. There's no surprise there. It survived well enough already, but that many Snow Fox attacks eventually will take down small chaff. So that chaff off is over. Oh, it's my turn already. So we've got a whole lot of I pounced on perhaps too many things, but I really didn't like what the Snow Foxes did, so I double charged one with the Giant and with the Thule. Probably didn't need to go in with the Thule as well. The Giant in the flank was perfectly enough, but you know, that's what I've gone and done. It's probably because the Giant does have the tendency to really whiff, and if you whiffed in that situation, it may be a flank from those fallen, so that's probably my reasoning. And then over here we've got the water elementals into his snow foxes to take them out, because water elementals, they're not bad. The single unit I have turned to face the Chimera, and it's only just, so I'm still maintaining threat on his fallen, and that is one regiment of Thule here, so that's the one with the Blessing of the Gods. Nice card that I just got. But as I said, the Thule Mythican's gone in to slap that Chimera and keep it in place, and the rest of the army is just curving in to approach the rest of his forces. So we've got here the Placoderms, not really threatening, but you know, they're there. They're in the dominate zone, so that's good enough. And then we also have, Ector. The Knuckers moved around. Looks like that was the one that got shot. So 3 damage on that's pretty good, considering it doesn't have it does have stealthy, but it doesn't have regeneration, so the wounds do stick. And then the rest of the army just progressing around here, and the Kraken's still not into anything, but definitely threatening. And so the change in that picture, well, we have here, I was thinking, is that to show hindered there? I am not sure. Or did I just take another picture? Dice. Oh, well, there's something dismal. That may have been the Giants' attacks, or what could it have been? Or it could have been a wind blast. No, there we go. That's it's the water elementals. They completely missed. Every single attack missed. I mean, melee 4+ is definitely like hard, but you don't expect to just miss with all of it. So there you go. There's some fun. But over here, the less surprising thing is that I did manage to take out the Tidal Swarm. But what I didn't do is adjust these guys properly. So I turned them a bit to face forwards, but what I didn't see, and so this is now obviously the turn 3 that has gone on, because it's all happening so dang fast, is that we have the horde of clansmen just going straight into the flank of my Thule, which is not what they like, because their only defense is being ensnaring, and they don't get ensnare in the flank, and also a flank's not good in any case, because it's the doubling of attacks, so don't expect them to be there in a few slides' time. And then MacLeod's just gone into the Giant to hold him down, while you can see, the Fallen, very cheeky, have gone around the side, and they're just waiting patiently to charge into the flank of my Giant, which is what they prefer, because then they won't have to worry about the ensnare. So yeah, not a great situation over here, particularly how the water elementals did nothing. Just showing that off better. And here, so look what I managed to do. I managed to do 4 damage. So there's a little dice over there. I did 4 damage with Mythican, 4 damage back to my little guy here. But, you know, that's alright. He can take that. He's 11-13, so no big deal. And then the rest of my force is being engaged. So this shows the rest of the battlefield. We've got the Placoderms being hit by those fallen from the hill, but they're hindered. So they got Thunderous Charge, but they're hindered because they went over this obstacle. So, you know, that's, it kind of equals out. And then we have the 2 Night Raider regiments going straight into the Gigas. So that is somewhat threatening, but you know, they've got big shields, so they can look after them. They're big boys. And so then that's the whole battlefield right there. So let's see what dies. So it's a bit more damage on me. Oh no, I take the 5 damage in the return, and now I'm wavering. So that dice 4. He must have put a 4. I put a 4 there, because I was just trying to help him out. Anyway, so 5 damage on him. He's wavered, but that's okay. I've done my job. I'm in the way, and he didn't charge off and hit all my flanks. Over here, well, no surprise, the Water Clansmen didn't waste any time cleaning up those Thules, so they got to have some seafood. And here, whoa, a cheeky waver on the Placoderms. It's just, that's kind of something that annoys me. Is like they just get wavered. But you know, the fact is that they wouldn't have done much damage in return anyway, so they're just sitting there. That's fine. But here, another surprising amount, 7 damage onto the Gigas. So yeah, but you know, they're fine. They're 15-17. Well, these guys are 16-17 thanks to the Staying Stone, so they should be fine. And 3 damage on the Giant, who doesn't really care. So in my turn 3, well, a few things happened. My monsters got into fights, which is, you know, really what I think the whole point of this game is just to get monsters fighting things. So the Coral Giant promptly did a charge. Like, I didn't even need to withdraw to do that. He just turned on the spot and went blur and hit him. So, you know, sometimes you need to do withdraw, but in this case you don't, which is good because I don't want him hitting on 5+ with that -1 that you now get with withdraw, so that would be terrible. Look, my water elementals are still in combat with snow foxes, so let's see if they can fight their way out of that wet paper bag. Then we have down here the Placoderms just sitting there. We've got Ector, not quite sure what he's going to do, maybe Windblast something. And then finally we have the, well, we've got all kinds of charges going on to these Night Raiders. So I think, yeah, there we've got Gigas going into one, and we have the Placoderms flank charging another, which, you know, maybe will do something, but they're also hindered because this nice forest here. And the Kraken has just gone off into those Draugr, so just going to have a bit of a meal. Most exciting, well, the unit of Thule that I just turned a bit, now the only Thule regiment remaining, with Elite, have gone in while I had the guy, my Mythican, just back off. So he just withdrew and then moved back his inches and doing a free pivot while he did so, because he's an individual. So he just pivoted this way, and then the regiment of Thule went right in to now really start taking on that dragon. And so here I do a measly 3 damage on the Fallen. You know, you just have all kinds of ideas, and he gets bonuses. You know, you get his D6 Slayer, you get his D6 extra, like, yeah, it's just, sometimes I really roll so poorly with that giant. But what I don't roll poorly with is that Thule. They go into the dragon and they take it down. So I don't have to worry about their Chimera anymore, which is good, because the whole idea of Chimeras and flying dragon things is to just make you worry an inordinate amount about something that's actually not that dangerous. But now we have the real thing that will change the entire game, and that is that the water elementals finally got out of that very wet paper bag. I mean, they're water elementals. They literally make the paper bag so wet that it should just fall apart, but sometimes they just can't win at all because of their melee 4+9 attacks. And the Nucker, which I neglected to mention, but he did get a flank charge on Krufnir, and he did an unknown amount of damage because it's behind Krufnir's arm. So just know that damage was dealt, but we will not know how much. And so the Gigas did 6 damage on one of those Night Raiders, but hey, guess what? The Placoderms managed to take out the other guys quite promptly, so that's pretty cool. And the Kraken just kind of does 6 damage to a Draugr regiment, but they don't care, so that'll continue on its own merry way. And it's showing turn 4, and not the fact that the dragon returned. It's still dead. And so here is something that was really silly, and I didn't really take a picture to show it off, but what happened is I, in my wisdom, thought, you know, look at those clansmen. Maybe I just want them away from the dominate zone. I'm going to wind blast them. And so I did. I wind blasted them back. They kind of went this way. Problem was, that wind blast allowed their arc to fall onto the flank of my giant. And so Matt, being the pretty good player that he is, noticed that now I had suddenly given him a flank, told me about it, so I felt really dumb, and then he charged the flank of my giant, which he didn't have before and wouldn't have been able to do anyway. So yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think we've all done something like we've wind blasted something, enthralled or surged, just because. You know, you're just like, why not? And you don't actually think the reasons why not. Like, you didn't actually answer that question. So I should have answered that question, what I thought was rhetorical, but actually needed an answer. And the answer was, well, if they move back more than 2 inches, their arc will now fall onto the flank of your giant, and you kill the giant. So, situation that we're in. Fantastic. We have MacLeod going into the water elementals, which hopefully they can withstand, and a double charge into my wavered Placoderms from Krufnir and those Fallen. So that could spell their doom, because they've already got 6 damage on them. Over here, the Night Raiders go into the Gigas once more, because I guess they don't, it's like defense 6 here, that they've done a bit of damage to, or defense 6 there, that have taken no damage. Oh, I don't know. So that's the whole situation. Will we see anything? No, we're just showing the whole battlefield here, looking pretty cool, dice everywhere, and yes, the Placoderms that were being trampled by Krufnir and the Fallen are dead. So there's no surprises there, because they're already at 6 damage, so it doesn't take much more to finish them off. They're only 14-16 after all. Over here, the Giant's also dead. These Norgebit clansmen are definitely racking up the kill points, thanks to the flanks I keep giving them. I don't think they do nearly this well if they were going into the front, but yeah, that's the situation. And what did I get out of it? 3 damage on Fallen. Jeez. Yeah, well, you know, let's just say I'm learning a lot from these games. And right now I'm just learning how to temper my ego in the post-mortem. So there we go. Over here, well, I don't think they did any damage, the Draugr into the Kraken, whereas the Night Raiders also I don't think did any damage. Yeah, that number didn't change, so the Gigas just withstood For some reason, the Night Raiders are doing really well that first round, and now not well at all. So it's now my turn, because things of mine have moved, and that's how I know. And so what I've done, I've just readjusted the Thule, but what I didn't want is the Thule to actually go in there and invite all kinds of charges. So they're just sitting here, and the only things I think that can see them from here are the Fallen, and they'd have to go firstly over this terrain, the obstacle, so that they're being hindered, and then they're being snared. So I know he won't take that at all. And so the Thule is just going to sit there until something better turns up. I might slowly edge that way. Yeah, and I think... Yeah, did MacLeod go into the water elementals? They haven't taken much damage, so I would say no. Maybe she's just standing in front of them menacingly. So what have I done? Well, I think I did charge her with my water elementals. The Thule Mythican's over here, not really doing much, but he's just trying to get line of sight on some things. The Nucker is just turning around to threaten everything while not being threatened whatsoever, so they're completely out of line of sight of anything, which is exactly what Nuckers like to do. And I'm trying to take out this final Night Raider regiment with my own Gigas and Placoderms, so it's just slowly taking them all down. And then Ector over here is just going into Krufnir to hold him up, I suppose, because by holding him up, I'm also holding up the Fallen right behind him. Oh yeah, and the Kraken is just continuing to munch on zombies. Norse zombies, at least. Yeah, so the Night Raiders can't take another flank and Gigas in the front, so those are gone. And over here, well, Ector did a monumental amount of damage. I think, yeah, whatever amount of damage the Nucker already did, it's only got 5 attacks, so it couldn't have been that much. Ector did a whole lot more and wavered Krufnir, so good on Ector. He can do a solid. I really like putting him in army lists if he can fit in. And then over here I do 1 damage, which is good enough. Disordered, as the token says. So, whatever that allows me to do, I'm not sure, but, you know, it's good. Maybe she can't fly. And so here is turn 5. Turn's coming thick and fast, and so, well, look, MacLeod's abandoned going into water elementals. It's not worth their time, it takes a lot of effort, and she's got better things to do, like hitting a Nucker, who has some real unit strength. Well, actually, the water elementals have superior unit strength, but yeah. What happened, we had an exchange because the Nucker couldn't be hit by these clansmen, so the clansmen took over, going into the water elementals while we have MacLeod going into my Nucker. And more damage being done on both, so this is probably like an after the fact kind of thing. We've got these Fallen that are just trying to reposition, but you know, it's just they were a bit too close to this, and then now we have the Norgebit clansmen behind them. They don't have much wiggle room to try and get around and actually get to fight something. While these Fallen, having finished off the giant, are slowly going to come and actually contribute to the rest of the battle. Down here, yeah, this just gives a better view, because I haven't done anything, obviously, it's not my turn. And, oh! Looks like the Kraken's free. Is this my turn? No. Well, the Kraken's free, so we've freed the Kraken from fighting all the Draugr, so he's taken out some unit strength all by his lonesome. I mean, it's not a great exchange of points, considering how much Draugr are versus how much a Kraken is, but, you know, he did, after 2 turns, he managed to get through them, so good on the Kraken. So that must have happened last turn. But yeah, we'll see what happens here. Yeah, well, firstly, it's now my turn. Firstly, it's my turn, and so nothing really got killed. I didn't expect MacLeod to go kill a Nucker, because he did have a bit of damage on it, but now the Nucker is just kind of buggered off. I've just put him over here so he can just have some unit strength. It's turn 5. You really need to start thinking about the scenario, right? So he's just gone off over here. MacLeod will probably chase him if she wants, but then there's also all kinds of things that might kill her. Not that it really matters, because killing her doesn't help me in the scenario whatsoever. What we do have going on here are the water elementals, which somehow only have 2 damage on them, so they must be... Oh, that's right, they're regenerating like crazy. And so they've gone into the... horde of clansmen along with the Thule, so that's pretty good. And we have the Thule Mythican and the Gigas going into those Fallen that were trying to readjust around Krufnir, and yeah, Ector's just going back in. But you can see Krufnir also regenerating up a storm. There's just wounds flying off everything, so you know, it's obviously when you're in the Dominate circle, things get a bit crazier. But I do take out that Fallen Horde thanks to the Gigas and the combined efforts with my Mythican. I find when I put him in with his Host Shadow Beast, he just puts in... It's like brutal. It's just like a good helping hand to finish it off that maybe the Gigas wouldn't be able to do by themselves. So yeah, the Thule Mythican is definitely a fantastic... That's why I don't like to put like things like Bane Chant and stuff on him, because I usually just want him to contribute direct damage rather than enhancing other units. So yeah, that's the tricky part about the Trident Realms list, which I'll probably go over when I actually introduce all the models that I've put together for this. But otherwise, yeah, we have a lot of damage done on the Norgebit Clansmen, and I think one of those tokens says they're wavered. You can see there, it's 16 damage, but they're wavered, so that's pretty good. We'll just sit there, and I think we're inside, at least some of us are inside that dominate zone. And I'm not sure what Matt's pointing to here, but he's pointing to it, and we will see what that means. We're zooming in, still got the pointing, but Ector's sitting there. Cool. It probably means something later. There we go. Maybe it was actually pointing as in that might be where the Fallen are. Anyway, the Fallen have flank charged Ector, which he doesn't like because, yeah, he's ensnaring in the front, but he is defense 6, so he may yet survive, and he's done a bit more damage on Krufnir, so we'll see what happens there. Any other damage going on? Well, yeah, we've got MacLeod going into the Gigas, so I was like, oh, alright, sure, I've got some damage. What are you going to do? A little bit more damage? I'll be fine. And everything else is really just sitting there, and I'm going to go back into those Horde Clansmen. And so this is just another shot from above. Yes, it's turn 6, in case you're wondering. I used to have, maybe I should go back to putting in little slides where I say turn 6, but I've taken them out in favor of just a little thing up here in the corner. But what do we have as a result? Well, unfortunately, the Gigas are killed by MacLeod, and Ector is killed by Krufnir and the Fallen. So my defense 6 stuff is starting to really die quite quickly, with the only one remaining, these placoderms right here. But that's okay, because they're unit strength 3, and so right now, the token being around here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if the water elementals are in, that's another 2, so it puts me up to 7, where it has 1, 2, 3, 4. So, and if these clansmen are in, that could tip it definitely over, because I think they're unit strength 4. So we'll see. So in my turn 6, well, we're charging in, because unfortunately these guys was just stuck here. The Fallen, he didn't really want to turn them. Why was he? We go back. He was there. He charged in. He wanted to go forwards. Why? Why not turn? You know what? I'm not sure. It might have been because the Gigas weren't dead yet. Yeah, he might have done them in the wrong order. Oh yeah, well, he used to probably take. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, ended up flank, and so I took it. So I go in with my Kraken and my Placoderms, and we know that Placoderms, if they're going to do anything, it's in the flank, which seems to be the way to use them. But one could say that about pretty much anything in Kings of War. It's pretty good in the flank. Anything, apart from like something you want to attack. And we're going back in with everything else down here into the Clansmen, and the Knuckers just kind of knucking about. Yeah, and unsurprisingly, the flanking attack onto Fallen, they don't appreciate that, and they do die. And then the real game changer is all the damage that the Thule and the Water Elementals do onto that Horde, and get rid of that as well. So now there's really just 1 unit strength left, and it's Krufnir. He is the boss, he's been regenerating like crazy, but unfortunately that's not enough to win Dominate. And so it is the Placoderms and the Kraken that really win it for me, which, you know, if you told me that at the start of the game, I wouldn't have believed you. But it goes on to turn 7, so now it's time to see what kind of things can be killed. And it's just the double team duo of the two like named characters. We've got Krufnir and MacLeod versus the entire Trident Realms, like 1,000 points. And so we have MacLeod going into the Thule and Krufnir going into the pretty much untouched Placoderms. So, but that makes sense. That's the 2 points of like all the unit strength that I have. And well, considering that was the end of the slideshow and went to it, I say that that didn't eventuate into anything where they died. So yeah, it's a victory to me. And I'm pretty happy with my Trident Realms list, although what I have been trying to do is get more inspiring in. Because what I am finding difficult is just having the Mythican and Ector as my sole sources of inspiring. 2 sources of inspiring is pretty difficult. The problem with the Trident Realms is that if you want units that do stuff but also inspire, there's not many to choose from. I did just purchase a Depth Horror Eternal, but I haven't put it together yet and painted it. but that's definitely one that's quite good, the Horror Eternal. Also, Worm Rider Centurions. I've just Zenithal primed one of those. So they're the kinds of things that I'm looking to put in, because I was putting in like an Aquamage or another Mythicon, but what I was finding is just it's a lot of points sunk into individuals, and like the Aquamage really doesn't do that much. Like it has some cool spells, but it's not really contributing anything else beyond its random spells, and it doesn't even have Bane Chant, which that's why the Mythicon's pretty good. But then I want the Mythicon in combat, so I don't really need another one, especially one that's worse than the one you get in the formation. So yeah, that's my gripe with my list. Now with Matt, what you'll see in his final outcome of his list was that he just needed more crushing strength, because yes, I've got some pretty tough full, but there's other armies that are all just defense 5 across the board, and so having the crushing strength one fallen being his main damage output can be pretty tricky. So he was thinking instead, yeah, going to more Frostfang, so Frostfang Cavalry, Lord on Frostfang, and yeah, dropping the Chimera, because you know these dragons are really cool to have, but really, I mean they can be competitive, but you have to just use them really, really well, and you know it's just. And they can just trip over so easily. Like in this case, an individual just scooting off and slapping it, so then another unit can come in and kill it. So yeah, you have to really think far ahead when it comes to using these dragons. And when it comes to a 6-game tournament, that's something that you got to think about. It's like, will you be able to think that well about that particular model by game 6? And if the answer is no, then it's probably better to just go with something a bit simpler, you know. So that's why you usually keep these kinds of models for the fun games. But yeah, like I said, I'm still using this army in terms of having the 2 monsters in it. I love having the 2 Titans, the Kraken and the Coral Giant. And what I'm going to be attending is Summer Slaughter, so that's coming up soon. That is a Crossman or a Cross-Con, or Mic-Con they like to call them. And so that will be fun, 2100 points. And so I will be bringing the Trident Realms, and I will be bringing the Double Titans, and we'll see how it goes. But the rest of it's mostly similar, where I've just changed a few of the chaff units and things like that. So yeah, so if you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, comment, let me know what I've done wrong, and please tell me that my basing's terrible, but I'll show you the pictures and you'll agree that at least it looks better than before. And yeah, also let me know if you like the new channel look and the intro and all those kinds of silly things. You know, I'll talk about it more in another video, but yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. So otherwise, for now, yeah, take it easy, and I'll see you next time.